So we're live.
All
All
right.
right. I think that's how I start every live. It's okay. So we're live. We gotta find a new opening to
Am
get
I live? Am I live?
All right. So hi everybody. Welcome to another Facebook Live. I'm here today with the beautiful Nancy Benitez, and we are gonna talk to you today about dating during and after divorce with and possibly without kids, and what that looks like when you're first going through a divorce and you start dating, and then how that looks after divorce, after you're all finalized with your divorce and you want to get back into the dating field. So, Nancy, welcome. It's great to be on another live with you.
Thank you.
You introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and what amazing, beautiful things that you are doing in the world.
Yeah, so my name is Nancy Benitez, and I am a men's relationship and health coach. And what I do is I help single men usually really get clear on their values, their intentions on who they want to date specifically, and then what kind of relationship they want. So it's about creating strategies and then moving forward with that into dating. I also work with, I didn't tell you this, but I'm actually starting a middle school boys group here locally to help teach middle school boys the same thing. So I'm excited to get them early, and so that they grow up with emotional intelligence and learn about integrity and rapport and all that, and health and nutrition. So thank you for having me here. It's been like since Christmas.
I know, our last one was right before Christmas, but that's
Yeah.
great. We
Yeah.
have a schedule now that we're going to be doing these on, and we are going to be bringing you so many amazing topics on, I don't know, anything and everything that has to do with divorcing, not divorcing, moving on, self-care. I mean, we have a whole list of topics that we're going to talk about probably for months on end. So
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm excited. People need some healing, so I'm excited. Thank you for the opportunity.
of course. So, well, let's get into it. So, let's start with dating during divorce and what that looks like. And I mean, if you're dating and you don't have kids and you're dating during divorce, it's probably not as big of a deal, right? Because you don't have
Yeah,
the issue of, introducing the kids to the person, and how is the other side going to react to that. I mean, I have seen some times where people have started dating in the middle of a divorce, and it did, of course, heat the divorce up a little bit, right? Because sometimes one person is not ready to move on and let go, even though they're in the middle of a divorce. And so it really can make things complicated inside of the divorce, not from a legal standpoint, just from an emotional standpoint. So,
yeah, and that's I have personally not gone through that, but I have like helped other people go through that, and it's really interesting because it's like an individual basis. And I'm going to say this, in my experience, I find that people who start dating right after they're going through the divorce, they seem to attract a similar partner than the one they're getting divorced.
yeah. Well,
you
right.
know,
I mean, that's the whole law of attraction at work, right? What we're focusing our
yeah.
energy on is magnetized into our life. So that makes sense that's the person that they're bringing into their life at that point. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah. So maybe it makes sense to, as we'll talk about in another episode, do some self care and
Yeah.
start to focus on you, and do some healing and forgiveness before you start that dating. But if you're not there yet and you do start dating, so I did date during my divorce from my ex-husband. And it did create a lot of emotional turmoil inside of the divorce. Now, we were still amicable during the divorce, and I've told my story on Facebook Lives multiple times, but I'll tell it again because it's a whole new audience probably. But my divorce overall was pretty amicable. Um, I filed in May. We were divorced by March, and I divorced when my son was 4. But I kind of, also put my foot down, and I was like, we are going to do this amicably. There is not, like, I don't care how much you hate me. We're getting along for our son, and, you can hate me all you want on your own time. But when we're around him and you've got him or I've got him, we're going to be friends together. And we both, that worked because we both agreed to do that. Right. And so I say I put my foot down, but really, we were both in agreement to do that. for our son. And I'm very, very much appreciative to my ex-husband and my son's dad for that we were able to do that. But I know that it was tough on him because I did start dating almost right away.
Yeah.
Right away. I left him in March and I started dating in April. And
Yeah.
started dating my current husband now in April after I left my ex-husband.
Yeah.
Um,
So can I ask you a question? Because
yeah.
it intrigues me, you know. So I have a friend who's a men's coach, and he says he's seeing this trend. You know, he just works with men on, you know, relationships, things like that. And he said, which was really interesting, he's like 2 years before a woman decides to get divorced, she's already decided. So it takes like about 2 years, right? And so when you started dating right after you were getting, or during your divorce, were you just like emotionally done? Like, were you just ready? Had you been ready for a while? You know?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And so I had been done for quite some time in the marriage, and there was just kind of no emotions there left for me inside of the marriage. And I did everything I could to try to work through it. You know, he wanted to go to marriage counseling and, you know, wanted to do everything. And I agreed. Um, and I mean, I will admit now that I agreed because I didn't want to have to deal with the accusations later of you didn't try, right? You didn't try to save the marriage or try to do anything. So I did go to marriage counseling. Now I didn't put a whole lot of effort into marriage counseling, right? Because I was done. But for me, the counselor also saw that. We had one meeting together, the first meeting with the marriage counselor together. And then the next meeting, the counselor was like, I want to meet with each of you separately. And I'm like, great. And I remember coming in the next week for my individual meeting. And I mean, I walked in, I like sat down, and he looked at me and he goes, you're done, aren't you? And I'm like, I'm done. He's like, then there is no need for us to continue. I see that. And I'll just work with him, you know, on, you know, getting through the next steps of, you know, you being done. So yeah. So I loved that, at least, you know, the counselor was able to see that, you know, right up. And, you know, and it was just like, there isn't anything for me left to do. Like, I'm drained, you know, there isn't
Yeah.
anything salvageable for me. And I had been done for quite some time. So I think, I don't know if 2 years was the length of time that I had been done, but it had been a significant amount of time. And so when I finally just said, oh, that's it, I'm done, and left, then yeah, I mean, I was right into, you know,
Yeah.
dating again. And I was still really young at that point. I got married at 20 years old. So when I got divorced, I was 26. So I was still pretty young.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah,
So
and you change so much from like 20 to 26, right? Like your
yeah.
frontal lobe doesn't even develop till you're like 25 or something crazy, you know? And it's interesting because on the guy side, you know, in working with men, it's like what I've heard from them and I'm not talking about all men, these are just the men I've talked to and worked with, is they notice something's wrong, but they think it's going to get better. And so they just like put their head down and they're like, if I provide, if I work, it's going to be okay. It's not, and then boom, like she's like, I want a divorce. And he's like, where did it come from? But what I tell my guys is, okay, let's rewind and let's start looking at the signs. And they're like, oh yeah, like, but you chose because you were hopeful, you
Right.
know, that it was going to work because that's what you vowed, that's what you decided, right? You're the provider, you know, it's that whole like primal thing coming in. They're like, it just came out of nowhere. And I'm like, well, let's look back. And
Yeah, the
then
truth is that it really didn't come out of nowhere.
yeah, and so it's like, this is where I help them understand women. It's like, if she's saying she wants to work on you, if she's asking you, are we okay? Those are signs that she's like needs something. She needs help, go to counseling, then get a coach, whatever it is, because after that, like, you know, and I can, you know, sympathize with you. I also was that way. Like a year, you know, before I got divorced, I was like done. I was avoiding him. I was like going to the gym for like 2-3 hours a day. I was like just in passing. And he used to work out of the home 2 weeks a month. And so it was just my daughter and I could just like have the house to myself. And then I felt good. And then when he'd come home, it was just like, you could like cut the tension with a knife because, you know, we'd eat dinner and just like it was like we were roommates, but like had this tension between us. And then, and we were separated after that. And yeah, and so then like we got divorced. But yeah, it's, the guys don't always see it coming, but if a woman's checked out, there's no kind of therapy, she's done, she's emotionally done.
Yeah,
So
I think that I'm going to add that to our topic of things to talk about in an upcoming show of, what are the signs that, this is
yes, here, let me write down.
show. So
signs she's done, or
yeah,
he's done. Well, I don't know about he, but I
yeah.
mean, new experience. But
And
yeah.
so I did then experience, since I was divorced when my son was 4, then I experienced dating, right?
Yeah.
Both during and then after the divorce was finalized. Although during the divorce, I only dated a couple of people. And like I said, I left my ex-husband in March, started dating my now current husband in April. And and I dated a few other guys in between there, and then my now husband and I got serious, several months later down the road. But my son was 4, and for me, what I had decided to do for that was that I wasn't going to have anybody meet my son, right? So he was 4 years old, and he was very, 4-year-olds are impressionable, right? And I think that they get attached to people very easily. And so I had decided that, and unless and until there was going to be something serious that happened in a relationship, that no one that I was going to date was going to meet my son. So that I didn't withhold the information from anybody. Everybody that I went out with knew that, hey, I have a son, he's 4, and no, you're not going to meet him unless something happens down the road that this becomes something serious, because he doesn't need to be involved in this aspect of my life. So and so that was a decision that I personally made that I thought was best for me and for my son. And so that is, I think, something, and from your aspect, and I don't know if you coach people through this on, what do you recommend, because I know the opposite of that. I've had friends who got divorced and who, just included their kids, right? Like, oh, hey, we're going out on a date and we're gonna go to Busch Gardens and bring in the kids, and so they were, and they did introduce them. So so what do you say to that, Nancy? What type of things have you seen with that?
So in my personal experience, because I have mine's 11, and she was younger back then. I was the same way. I was like, this is something and I have her every other week. And so like on the weeks I didn't have her, I would date and I'd go out. And then when she wasn't home, or she was home, nobody could meet her, like, unless it was serious, and even when my current boyfriend, I introduced him as my friend, because we were like just casually dating then. And I knew he was really special. And so it wasn't until later, and he has a daughter as well. And he used to call her on the phone all the time. And he's like, I need to go make a phone call to my daughter, and he'd make his phone calls. And it wasn't until like we got really serious that we introduced the kids to each other. Now there's been men, and, I've heard stories too, where they introduce the kids, and like you said, the kids love them. And I can actually tell you, my ex-husband and I, we co-parent, and I know that he was dating this woman, and he introduced her to our daughter, and she had kids. Well, my daughter got attached to the kids. She got attached to her, and then he ended up breaking up with her, and she was like heartbroken.
Yeah.
And so I was like, of course, Mama Bear's like, ah. But, I think unless you're serious, I don't know, in my opinion, you don't want to put your kids through that, because then it just confuses them. And especially like teenagers too, and little ones, like any age really, because it's like, well, why are you with my dad then? Why can't you be with my dad? And they don't quite understand when they're that young, I don't think. And then when they're her age, there's like, hormones, their body's starting to change, and now you're bringing in these people. They don't understand, even at teenagers, and they become resentful, so I think that it's better to make sure that it's somebody, I would say even like wait, like 3 months to 6 months to, I waited like a year, and then I was like, because you don't know, and you don't want to keep breaking up and meeting your kids, breaking up, what kind of lessons is that teaching them as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So And so what about, so I did, as I said, I dated during the divorce, but you know, for me, it was because like we just talked about, like I was done for so long before
Yeah.
the divorce that for me, it was just natural to just move on during the divorce. Now, as I said already, of course, didn't introduce my son to anybody that I dated, especially
Mhm.
during the divorce. And I don't think that I would have done that during the divorce. Now, I don't know that I now from, you know, both a divorce coach and a lawyer side of things, I don't know how big of an advocate I am at dating during the divorce, at least not in the beginning stages, right? When those emotions are so high. Now, I mean, if you're in one of those long-term divorces, right, where things are still 2 or 3 years
Yeah.
pending inside of, you know, of a divorce, um, then I certainly think that, you know, at that point it's okay. But, you know, if you're in those beginning stages of divorce, I think that you probably should just take that time for you and, you know, work through all of those emotions. Because even if you're somebody like you and I, that we were completely done and ready to be out and like, that's it, let's move on, you know,
Yeah.
I still dealt with emotions, right? It was
Mhm.
still, you know, an ending of something. Of course, for me, I now view it as a beginning of, you know, everything that's happened since then. You know, there was still a whole lot of emotions because not, even though I knew that I was done with the marriage, there's still another person there, right? And I still cared, and I still cared that he was hurt, and I
Yeah.
still cared, you know, that, you know, he was upset. And so, and that had was emotional for me, right?
Yeah.
And you know, so I think taking the time to work through those issues and to work through those emotions before you start to try to move in to another relationship or dating with somebody else is so important to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And, for me, the biggest piece, if I like could give a tip or something that really worked for me, is before moving on to dating again, it was really grieving the relationship. And, as much as this sounds like almost like the death of the relationship,
Mhm.
because even though I left, like you said, it was still, we were together 18 years almost. It's, we had so many memories. We were together before our daughter, now we had a beautiful daughter. And so it's, for me, it was really about grieving and surrendering that it wasn't going to be like that anymore. And I would sit and cry, and I'm like, did I make the right decision in leaving? But I was happy. I was happier. I was doing personal growth. I was healing those old relationship wounds that I've been married twice. So, I was married at 19, and then again, I got married again for a longer period. And the first time I didn't even allow myself to grieve. Like I had a miscarriage, and I just like went back into dating. And like I made, the same mistakes dating, like I was saying, attracting the same kind of men, instead of really going inward, doing some self-reflection and saying, okay, what parts of who I am can I heal now, so I'm not repeating those same mistakes? Like, what do I want in a relationship
Yeah,
before I move on just to the next whatever comes along,
yeah,
So it was
absolutely.
grieving, I think, was the biggest help for me anyway.
And
So
so what I can talk about, if we want to kind of move that into that, is what does it mean legally inside of your divorce? And so my caveat to that, that I always have to disclaim, is that I am a licensed Florida attorney. So this is only applicable to Florida only, because that is the only place that I am licensed and can talk about the law in. But so what does that mean legally when you're in a divorce
mhm.
and the other side is dating? And you know, before we went live, Nancy, you and I had even talked about potentially even like, you know, someone cheats and then they leave and that's the cause of the divorce, and what, you know, what does that look like as well? And so what I can say briefly into that is that, you know, adultery is not relevant in a Florida divorce. It's not even admissible inside of a Florida divorce, except for some very limited circumstances for very limited reasons. But
Mhm.
overall, in the larger scheme of things, it doesn't even come into play in a divorce. The courts really don't care. We're a no fault divorce state. So um so that part doesn't matter. And then so again, I can bring this back to my personal experience. I remember sitting at the mediation table with my ex-husband as we're mediating out, you know, the terms of like our parenting plan, and you know, and the time
Mhm.
agreement and everything. And he tried to to put into the parenting plan that, you know, I couldn't have anybody over when I had my son in my care, and I, you know, I couldn't do this, and like nobody could sleep over while my son was there or whatever. And of course I got offended. I'm like, what kind of mother do you think I am, that like, you know, I would have random men sleeping over,
Yeah.
you know, while I have my son.
Yeah.
But which I'm like, I wouldn't do anyway. And but and that's, let me come in that say that, you know, if I certainly don't disparage anybody who does make the decisions to do that, right? But it was just something that I chose for myself, for my son, to not do that. But you know, if you choose to say that that's right for you in your household and with your kids, and you're, you know, then that's something that you choose to do, and you have to look at how the is affecting your family and your children, and if that's fine or not fine for you. So but what I remember saying there is that, you know, he actually had an attorney and I didn't. I did my divorce completely on my own, which as an attorney I do not advocate for, right? But I did do mine on my own. But you know, the great thing though is that his attorney was like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. Like, that's not enforceable, right? A judge isn't going to tell, you know, isn't going to uphold an order that tells her who she can and can't have around in her own home, and who she can and can't have, you know, be in a relationship with, and who you can and can't introduce your children to. And also from a legal standpoint, that is in the most cases that's true. The time that is a factor inside of court is if you can bring into court actual valid evidence, not just I don't like them and they're not good for my kids, but you have to have a reason to come in and say that your child being around this person is not in the best interest of the child, and how they're going to be detrimental to, you know, to the child or to the relationship between that parent and the child. And then the court isn't going to tell that person they can't be in a relationship with them. They're just going to say, okay, well, in the times that you have your kid, you can't be with that person, you know, be around your kid. So you know, so they can limit it that way to some extent, but you have to have actual evidence and proof of that. You can't just come in and go, I don't like them, I don't want my kids with them. So you know,
what's the, so, you know, for me, this is really good because I, you know, that way I can help explain and then send them to you. But like evidence, I'm assuming it's like abuse, or is there specific like things?
Yeah, generally the things that I see from the legal standpoint where the court's going to say that's not in the best interest of the kid and they can't be around that particular person is, yes, it's evidence of abuse, or it's that person is substance abuse or alcohol abuse, or, you know, those types of things. It is not a difference in how you discipline your children. You know, that does not go, you know, that does not fly in the court, you know, and it's not that I don't want my child to be left alone with them. I don't want that person babysitting my child. That's not the court. So, you know, one of the things that's in a time sharing agreement or in a parenting plan in Florida is that each parent has the right to make decisions in the day-to-day care of their children. So when my child's with me, I have the right to make those day-to-day care and decisions, including who my child's around and who my child is left with, right? And if my child's left with you, then you know, if you're the other parent, then you have the right to make those day-to-day care and decisions, because courts work under the first assumption and premise that you are both parents and you are both adults, and that you can make decisions for your children. So until you do something that shows the court differently, the court is going to allow you to make those decisions and who your child can be around and who they can't be around. And they're not going to get involved in that decision unless there is something, and generally it's got to be, I mean, it's something that is, you know, extreme, that then they're going to say, okay, that child can't be around that person while they're with you in your care. So they're not going to prevent the parent from having time sharing. They're just going to say, when you have time, you can't be around that person while you're, you know, you have time with your kid for that. But they're not going to do that, again, just based on the fact that you don't like them, or you don't agree with it, or you don't like the relationship, or you know, you're pissed off and you're angry or whatever because they're moving on, and you know, they're not going to get involved in that. So
yeah. So as far as evidence, if I may ask, because I know that like I know another divorce coach that works with, you know, there's, he doesn't know obviously the legalities, but when you say evidence, so say someone's substance abuse, say their partner's, you know, has substance, like how do you even prove that? you know, like you can't just bring a bottom. Here's his DNA, I guess, or something. I don't know.
No, yeah, it's difficult to prove, and that it is a very difficult area when we're dealing inside of divorces or inside even post judgment modifications of things. You know, I've got cases going on right now in post judgment modification cases, and we're dealing with this exact issue of, you know, substance and alcohol abuse, and you know, and it's really prevalent in this case, and you know, the kids are not safe going where they're going in this particular case, and yet I can't get the courts to do anything about it, right? We're finally making some progress in that area, but it took a lot to get there. And you know, and sometimes it just takes persistence to get there, and sometimes it's just patience. You know, if you show up to pick up your kids one time and the other parent is, you know, drunk, or you know, they smoke some weed and they're high or whatever, that under most circumstances isn't going to be enough. You know, it's that one time thing. The court's going to be like, you know, we all have a glass of wine with dinner, you know, I overdrink at dinner,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So that one time thing isn't going to cut it generally in court, but it's that, so it takes some time, and it's that repeated stuff, and you know, things that you could do to, you know, to show the evidence is, you know, I almost always tell people, especially in really non-amicable situation, you know, if it's really contested or they really don't get along, is never be alone on the child exchange, right? Have a witness with you, but that witness needs to be a completely neutral witness, and they can't get out, they can't speak to the other person, to the other parent, they shouldn't be involved, like they are literally just there so that one, no allegations can come against you, and but two, to also witness potentially what the other parent is doing, you know. So Florida is also a two-party consent state to being recorded, but you know, if you think that that's going to be an issue, then I, you know, I tell them, I'm like, put the other parent on alert that you are going to record the exchanges, or and sometimes I've had to put it in a court order where, you know, if they're having video chats or phone calls with their kids, that, you know, the parent is allowed to record the video sessions. Now that doesn't happen immediately, right? You have to support reasons to say there's a reason why this needs to be monitored and recorded, right? So, but once we have some evidence of why that needs to happen, we can do that. And so I think I'm rambling on to give you an answer that is
no, I think it's helpful.
a standard lawyer answer, to just go, you know, it really depends. And it's so case by case. And sometimes it is so hard to prove that, you know, sometimes it just takes, unfortunately, it takes extreme things to happen in many circumstances. And one of the frustrating things that I tell my clients a lot, and that I have to deal with a lot, is that I tell everybody our courts are reactive, they're not proactive. So they can't get involved on what ifs and maybes. They have to wait until, unfortunately, something happens, right? We can't shelter children from maybe a parent's going to abuse them. We have to wait until they're abused to come in and shelter, right? And then unfortunately, we can't get domestic violence injunctions on maybe I'm going to get abused. I have to wait till there's abuse, right? Before we get an injunction. So that is one of the, I don't, it's a pro, but it's a con, right? For both ways, right? We don't want people to be making a, you know, maybe it's going to happen allegation and then taking kids away. But at the same time, we have to wait till something happens before we can get involved and do anything. So,
So I have two questions.
okay.
The first one is, when you say like a non-biased party, could it be like a teacher that notices, like, say they exchange at school or something, and notices the parents like totally drunk or something? You know,
if somebody else witnesses it, that's always one of the best forms of evidence, because the one thing that's the hardest thing in court to come against, right, for evidence is my word versus yours, right? When we're having the he said, she said in court, it really almost generally never goes anywhere, you know, because, you know, I'm going to come to court and be like, Nancy was drunk 3 times and I dropped the kids off. And Nancy's going to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was never drunk. You know what I mean? And so, and that's it, right? That's what the court has to weigh. So, so if there's a third party, and, you know, really the more non-biased they are, the better. So yeah, if you can exchange in a public place, if you can do the exchange at the school, many parents do the exchanges at police departments. I understand that. I'm not a big fan of exchanging at police departments. It's because, as
Yeah.
the kids get older and they're being exchanged in parking lot of, police departments,
Yeah.
there's, I just think there's some negative connotations that go with that. But if that's what you have to do for the safety of your children and you, then by all means, that is one of the best places to do that, right? But there's so many other public places that can happen where there's, witnesses around and somebody that can see, or where it's recorded on cameras, in parking lots and things like that. So, and then again, if you have to, if you're exchanging it like a park or something where maybe there's not cameras and it's random witnesses who you won't know to go get when you're going to need them, you do have the option of, like, I am going to record our exchange, and and go ahead and record that. So
you can't like do it without saying anything though,
can't
right?
do it without saying anything.
Yeah, you have to like tell them.
Yeah.
And then can you tell them right before? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you can't record someone without their knowledge that they're being recorded.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, it's actually a felony in Florida if you do that. So I'm telling everybody now, it is a felony to record somebody without their knowledge. So don't do that.
Yeah. And then the second thing was, and I'm asking this because I grew up in LA, where my friends were gangsters and drug dealers and all this, and why that comes to play is a lot of them were abused. And so it's good to know, it's good to know this information for people out there who are seeing it and they feel like their hands are tied. And so what do you think about also like keeping a journal,
always
like something every time they drop off their kid or they notice an incident, writing it down so that they can refer back to that in the courtroom later?
I am a huge advocate of everything I do in my life is a spreadsheet. So, spreadsheets, but yes, definitely journals, because, it's so hard to go back into court for them to be like, I don't know, it was one exchange 3 months ago, and then there was an exchange maybe a week or 2 weeks after that. Like, that is not as strong as I have a journal. And on, March 6th, this happened. On March 24th, this happened. On April 6th, this, and we have those things out. That is much stronger. And then to follow up and go back, we are so far off our topic, but that's okay. I think we're doing good.
Well, I mean, no, because these people sometimes are dating.
Absolutely.
Right? They're going through a divorce. They start dating somebody new who's either an alcoholic or a drug addict or is abused. And what the parents are like.
And so to go back on the when you're exchanging and to have an unbiased witness, if you don't have an unbiased witness, if there isn't a teacher, or at the police station, that's not an option. You are going to a park and recording isn't an option for you. Just having a witness is great, So having your mother, your brother, your sister, your best friend, somebody with you. But again, just they should never be involved. They shouldn't, shouldn't get out. They shouldn't speak. They shouldn't be involved in the exchange. They are literally just there and stay in the car, stay where they need to, and, and of course, the children should never know the reasons why and what's going on, right? So the children have to stay out of everything at all times. In Florida, especially in our local counties here, that is by court order. Anytime a case of children is filed in court, is that the children are, you're not to speak about divorce, you're not to speak badly about the other parent, they have to actually be parents and be amicable by court order together. So
so that is okay.
So those are all big things to consider. And so if it's not the parent that's having alcohol and drug issues, but potentially the new paramour now, if they're around and they're there at exchanges, then definitely having a witness with you or having somebody with you that can say that and see that, and that, okay, now I'm dropping my kids off into the situation where they're going off with somebody that's in this state, and you've got a witness to that, is certainly something that could be helpful, is helpful in court. Whether or not it wins for you, yes or no, it's case by case, but it's better than having nobody with you.
And then if your kids mention it too, I feel like that's something you need to write as well, right? Because kids are so like, they're so real, like, oh yeah, mom was drunk with her boyfriend, whatever. I
write it down that they said that to you. Now there's so much caution in where I have to go with that, because the parents want to start questioning the kids or
Oh,
getting more information or following up. And, you know, I have to tell people, you know, like, you can't go down that route. If your kid's like, mom was so drunk at dinner. Okay, well, mom was drunk at dinner and we got to kind of, you know, you can't be like, is mom drunk all the time? How often does mom drink? You know, because then the kid starts to be like, oh, I shouldn't have said anything. Or, you know, now that,
that's
you know, and
true.
you are sitting in the middle and you can't do that, you know, and, you know, you can absolutely, like, you know, listen to what they say. And if they say things, and then if you hear that things start to be a problem,
Yeah.
you need to bring in a third party professional. So you need to
Okay.
send them to a counselor or send them to a therapist, because they can talk to that. You need to talk to a third party who's trained
Oh,
to talk
okay.
to children about those things, because you as the parent need to stay out of it, right? Especially when you're in the middle of a divorce. You have a court order that says you can't put the child in the middle of a divorce. So,
Oh, wow. I
you know,
didn't know that. Okay.
really bringing in, and if therapy or counseling isn't necessarily something that's needed, then we have other third party professionals that are trained, like parenting
Mhm.
coordinators or guardian ad litems, or, you know, people like that that we can potentially bring into the case to, you know, that are trained to talk to the children about it and to hear what's going on and make recommendations to the court as to the best interest of the child.
Yeah. Wow. I had no idea. So, what I'm hearing is you just listen to your kids, write it down, don't ask. And then if you notice a trend, reach out to a professional, because then it's valid.
Yeah,
Right. And it
yeah,
doesn't have to be a therapist. It doesn't have to be like, and not mentioning to your kids, well, you need to go to therapy because whatever. It's like, hey, we're going to go to someone who's going to help us with, the divorce or whatever,
yeah,
and helping the kids not feel like you said, then they feel like they did something wrong. And that's the last thing you want to do,
right.
for
Yeah, yeah,
children.
because, you know, kids love both their parents and they deserve to love both of their parents, and they certainly
Yeah.
don't want to feel like they got the other parent in trouble, or that they did anything wrong, or that this person that, you know, their parent is around, that they got them in trouble, or that they did anything wrong, you know. And you're so you don't want to put your kids in that situation where they're feeling that way. And so,
Yeah.
and if it comes down to the court, where the court's like, why are you questioning your kids, why are you bringing them in the middle, why are you doing that, you can set yourself up to, you know, get in trouble with the court, even though, you
Yeah.
know, and I have parents do that. And of course we have the best intention, because we want to make sure our children are safe, and we want to make sure that they're, you know, that everything is fine. But it's just it's such a cautionary line that we have to toe with that,
Yeah.
and into where we go and what we ask and what we question them about. So
Yeah. And, for me, I think is this coming from a place of love for my child? Because I love that. And maybe some people don't, but I love that you can't put your child in the middle, and that there's actually a law that prohibits you from doing that. Because how much damage do our kids already get with, I know my daughter, I'm sure our divorce, she's already has all this beliefs about it, as much as we talk, and as much as, it's still hurtful. They're doing their own grieving. And now you're trying to probe, it's just coming from heart, and everything is going to work out as it should, with you taking action, and doing what you can if you see that kind of behavior from your spouse,
yeah,
and then taking action when it's necessary.
yeah.
So
And you know what's funny is when you talk about how it affects kids, and there's actually a lot of studies out there that have been done that show, actually, believe it or not, that kids are resilient and kids are not affected by the divorce as much
oh,
as we think they are. They are affected by the actions of the parents.
okay. Phew. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm still not off the hook
Yeah.
though.
So, you know, the divorce itself for most children is not something that's traumatic and this just like crazy thing that we are imputing to our kids that we think they're going through. But
Oh,
our
okay.
emotions, our actions, our reactions, how we
Yeah.
treat it, and how we treat it with our children is what affects the children the most, which makes
Okay.
sense actually when you think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And now that I think about it, like in all our lives, there's contrast, right? There's always contrast. And that's just how to, how two people can not be together, but still get along, just because you have different beliefs, different opinions, and you grew apart. So I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure
Yes.
that puts a load off of me.
Of course. And so I think that can take us quickly. Oh my gosh, we've been on, I think, for a very long time now.
Oh,
But that can take us quickly then into that transition of, dating after divorce, right?
yeah.
And even after maybe it's several years and your kids are a little bit older, and what that looks like, and how do you, how do you handle that with kids, and how do you transition into the introduction of your kids, right, to that person. So for me, I think that I already said that, so my son did not meet my now current husband. He didn't meet Will until we were close to 2 years into dating before he ever met Will. And maybe it was about a year and a half or so. And
Yeah.
so, and Will and I were at that point still pretty, like, we were serious at that point, a year and a half in. But he wouldn't stay at my house on the nights that I had Seth. And though a lot of that was his decision as well, where I was like, you can meet him now, like, we're serious, we can get there. But he was like, nope, it's not time yet, and so he made a lot of those decisions as himself as well. And it was at the point when we had started having conversations of like moving in together and stuff, is where we were like, okay, at some point, you're gonna have to meet him here,
Totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. And it's, I think too, when you're dating that other person who really wants to meet the kid, there's that other side, right? And I'll be quick because I know we got to go, but be patient with the mom, the parent and the child. Like, don't try to rush her into having her introduce your kid, because that causes tension in your relationship as well. And I've talked to people who have had that. They're like, well, you must not love me because you're not introducing me to your child or whatever. It's like, well, you need to just respect the space they're in, and it'll happen. But like you said, he was like, no, it's not time. And then when it's serious, because they have to get ready too, like the party that's, it's now you're going to be a family. They're basically taking in, a child as well. So that's a whole other topic.
Whole new dynamic.
Right. I mean, it's
and
like,
we did do a slower transition, right? So it's not like I introduced him and suddenly, he's over spending the night every night. We did, let's go to dinner, or let's go to the park, or let's go to Busch Gardens, or so we did just like daytime things or hanging out or whatever, and kind of built into that transition of, what, he's going to be around, and this is staying over.
And then I think there's still resistance from the child because they don't quite understand whether they're 6 or, I know mine, 11. But I had a whole show on this through Manifest, is you have to just be willing to be patient. They're not, you've known them for a year and a half, your child has not.
Right.
So, don't expect immediately the bond and them to, oh my God, I love them. And, maybe sometimes, but it's going to be slow, and you're just going to have to like be patient with that too, with this beautiful child. Yeah,
absolutely. So. And I think that is probably the biggest key takeaway on dating with kids and doing anything with kids, is it's a whole new dynamic for them. And that, remember that they're going to deal with it and respond and react to our emotions and to how we treat it. And so if we don't make things a big deal, and we aren't taking things, when we're around them as, this heavy weight or this overly emotional journey or things like that, then they're gonna take their lead from us. And then as well, when you're moving on and starting to introduce them to new people in your life, to new friends, and then to new paramours ultimately, then they're gonna take your cue. They're like, make it fun, make it light, make it all of these things, and they're going to transition just fine. But understand that they are their own little person with their own personality. And you're right, Nancy, I think you have to be patient, you have to take time, you have to give them time to make the transition for themselves as well. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been a year, and my daughter's just now like almost a year, and my boyfriend's lived here, and just now she's like warming up to him, and it's been almost a year. So be patient out there.
Both
they'll come
sides,
around.
both
Yeah.
sides of patient, right?
Yeah, everyone.
If you're the dating and the other person's got the kid, right? You have to be patient too. I think you made such a huge point, Nancy, where you were like, or they could be thinking, oh my gosh, you must not love me enough because you won't introduce me to your kid. But you have to understand that, it's not about you, and it's not about, whether they care about you or don't care about you or love you or don't love you. It's a protection, right? It's not just a protection for me, but it's a protection for my kid. And my kid is my entire world. And there is nobody more important to me in this world than my kid. And I think that, I could go off on a whole new dynamic on what that looks like in relationships. But, for me, I made that very, very clear that my son is the world and he is my first priority. And, nothing comes above him. And, and that's where I am. And that's how I am. That's who I'm going to be. So it's not about not loving you. It's not about you. It is protecting my son. So
yeah, I agree. Well, thank you. This was amazing. And time flies when you're.
I know. I think we've been on almost an hour. This is.
Are you?
It was supposed to be 20 minutes.
Well, thank you. And we'll be on next week. I'm sure. I was taking notes here. There's a whole, oh my gosh, we could talk for years.
Yes. Oh my, we probably will. We have so many topics. So Nancy, if somebody wants to reach you, how can they contact you?
They can find me on Facebook at Manifest with Nancy, and then they can reach me via my email at hello@manifestwithnancy.com. And on did I say my website? manifestwithnancy.com.
All right, awesome. And as usual, if you're watching this, you're on my Facebook page and you're on my live stream, so you know how to reach me. Nancy is tagged in that, so you can reach her and you can slide into her DMs or into mine if you need to reach into either one of us. And my phone number is right there on the screen, but in case you're watching and not or listening and not watching, it's 813-501-7721. Or you can, of course, find us on Facebook and send us a message there. So, Nancy, it has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
So look forward to next week.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, have an amazing night, and we will see you next week.